Actress Natalie Wood was intoxicated and angry after an argument between her husband and actor Christopher Walken when she stormed off a yacht this weekend and apparently fell into the sea. There was no evidence of foul play in the 43-year-old actress's death.
For more than 40 years, a single unsettling question has lingered quietly through Hollywood. It has been spoken in documentaries, noted in old reports, and mentioned softly in late-night interviews. And at the center of that question stands Robert Wagner. Once admired for his grace and charm, he gradually became something far more complex, a man living within a mystery that never fully lifted, a husband carrying the weight of love, doubt, and a silence that followed him for decades. Now, at 95, the bright glow of fame has softened, and only a quieter truth remains. A truth he has held within since that cold night in 1981, the night that altered the course of everything. It was Thanksgiving weekend, November 28, 1981, when Hollywood's golden pair, Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner, set out on their yacht, the Splendor, for what was meant to be a peaceful retreat near Catalina Island. With them were Natalie's brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken and the yacht's captain, Dennis DeVerne. For Natalie, the trip was meant to be a pause between filming days, a quiet moment away from the demands of her world. Just a small escape, gentle and unremarkable. Yet it became the moment that would shape Wagner's life from that night forward. The day began in a spirit of ease. The sea was calm, the mood was light, and the group shared champagne as their laughter drifted over the water. A few photographs captured the warmth of those early hours. Locals later recalled seeing them at Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant, offering smiles, raising glasses to friendship, and settling into what appeared to be a pleasant evening. Walken later shared that the conversation had drifted toward Natalie's career, her desire to move back into more serious roles, and it was during that discussion that Wagner's unease began to appear. In his 2008 memoir, Pieces of My Heart, Wagner himself acknowledged those feelings, calling them both the best and worst of me. When the group returned to the Splendor around 10 that night, the mood had shifted. The earlier warmth had faded. The captain remembered that the light-hearted chatter was gone, replaced by quiet tension. Those quiet moments soon rose into sharp words. DeVerne recalled Wagner setting a wine bottle down forcefully on the table, the moment echoing through the cabin as he confronted Natalie, troubled by what he believed was too much closeness between her and Walken. His voice, normally gentle and composed, carried a strain that had not been there before. Walken tried to ease the atmosphere, but eventually stepped away to his cabin, leaving the couple to speak alone. Soon after, the night grew still once more. Then that stillness turned heavy. Natalie could no longer be found. Wagner said he believed she had gone to bed, but when he noticed her absence, a sense of concern took hold. The yacht's small dinghy, the simple boat used to reach the shore, was also missing. Yet those who knew Natalie were puzzled. She had always been deeply uncomfortable with open water, and the idea of her leaving alone in the quiet hours of the night, barefoot and in her nightgown, felt out of place. At 3:30 in the morning, Wagner contacted the Coast Guard. Search teams moved through the darkness for hours, navigating cold winds and the vast, quiet ocean, hoping to understand what had unfolded that night. When dawn arrived on November 29th, a quiet truth emerged from the waters. Natalie was found a short distance from the yacht, her life tragically brought to an early end at just 43. She was dressed in a thin nightgown, socks, and a red parka, clothing far too light for the cold night she had faced. The official ruling described it as an accident, yet the marks noted on her arms and legs, the light scratches on her neck, and her well-known fear of deep water suggested a far more complicated story. Hollywood fell into stillness, but in private, the murmurs continued. Jealousy, regret, and unresolved emotion became the three shadows that stayed with Robert Wagner for the remainder of his life. In the days that followed, investigators worked quickly to assemble a version of events that appeared orderly and uncomplicated. According to Wagner, after the tense exchange earlier in the evening, Natalie had simply returned to her cabin. He later suggested she might have gone out to adjust the yacht's small dinghy, perhaps concerned it was not securely properly. But that explanation left many wondering, and those questions have remained part of the story ever since. Wagner said he believed that after hearing the dinghy moving against the side of the yacht, Natalie may have tried to steady it and somehow ended up in the water. For a time, the public accepted this account, grateful for an answer, even if imperfect. But as additional details slowly surfaced, the clarity began to fade. Hours later, the small rubber dinghy, the Valiant, was found drifting quietly on the waves. Its engine was off, the key still resting in the ignition, and the oars neatly tied in place, untouched. It did not appear that anyone had used the dinghy at all. This led investigators to begin asking difficult questions. If Natalie had truly gone to secure it, why were the oars still tied down, the motor untouched, and the interior completely undisturbed? Even the light switch was off, with no footprints or signs that she had ever stepped aboard. Each new detail made the explanation of a simple accident feel less certain. Then the autopsy report added further complexity. Natalie's blood alcohol level was measured at 0.14%, and traces of seasickness medication and mild pain relievers were found in her system, enough to leave her unsteady and fragile that night. But what drew the most attention were the fresh marks on her arms, knees, and face, suggesting she may have experienced some kind of physical distress before entering the water. In 2013, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office revisited the case and issued an updated review. Their findings indicated that several of Natalie's injuries likely occurred before she reached the water. That single conclusion reshaped the public's understanding of the night and made the earlier explanations feel increasingly incomplete. Then came the accounts of two witnesses, Marilyn Wayne and John Payne, who had been anchored nearby on their own boat. They later shared that they heard a woman calling out for help for nearly 15 minutes. "Help me! Someone please help me," Wayne recalled, describing the voice as distressed and unforgettable. After a pause, she said she heard a man's voice respond, steady, though slightly slurred, saying, "Okay, honey, we're coming to get you." But no one ever came. The night returned to silence. Over the years, Robert Wagner's account of what happened shifted, sometimes subtly, sometimes in noticeable ways. In 1981, he told detectives that Natalie had simply disappeared. Later, he suggested she had gone to secure the dinghy. And in his 2008 memoir, Pieces of My Heart, he described the entire night as a tragic misfortune. Yet investigators remained uneasy. As Lieutenant John Carina of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department commented in 2018, he's constantly changed his story a little bit, and his version of events just doesn't add up. By 2012, Natalie's official cause of loss was updated to reflect undetermined factors alongside the possibility of having entered the water accidentally. Detectives publicly identified Wagner as a person of interest, explaining that his timeline left too many unanswered questions. But without physical evidence or direct witnesses, there was no clear path forward. The case settled into a space between lingering doubt and quiet sorrow.
For investigators, the truth seemed just out of reach. For Wagner, it became a weight that followed him, a presence that no interview or explanation could fully lift. But one person refused to let the uncertainty fade. Lana Wood, Natalie's younger sister, stepped forward with determination. While Robert Wagner gradually withdrew from public life, Lana moved into the spotlight with a single purpose: to seek clarity wherever she could find it. She never accepted the early explanations. "My sister was terrified of water," she repeated over the years. "She would never go near that dinghy, especially not in her nightgown." Her conviction remained unwavering. In her 2021 memoir, Little Sister, My Investigation into the Mysterious Loss of Natalie Wood, Lana shared decades of unanswered questions, personal memories, and her belief that the story told in 1981 was incomplete. Her voice became one of the strongest reminders that the uncertainty surrounding that night had never truly faded. Lana made a serious claim. She said Wagner's jealousy had risen sharply that night, creating an atmosphere that felt unsettling and intense. She also stated that Captain Dennis Davern later confessed to her that he had not told the full truth in order to protect Wagner. Her words brought renewed attention to a story Hollywood believed had long settled into history. According to Lana, Captain Davern told her that Wagner had raised his voice in frustration, followed by a loud noise, and then an instruction from Wagner saying, "Don't turn on the lights. Don't call anyone." Her account sent shockwaves through the industry. Some believe she was courageously speaking up, determined to reach a truth others preferred to avoid. Others felt she was a grieving sister still searching for closure. But one thing was clear. Her persistence encouraged the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department to reopen the investigation. In 2011, new witnesses came forward and long-buried memories resurfaced. A fisherman, only 17 years old on the night Natalie was lost, said he heard a woman calling out across the water, her voice filled with fear. Another acquaintance recalled moments from the 1960s, describing times when Wagner's temperament seemed far different from the polished image the public admired. Each new recollection slowly chipped away at the simple version of events that had been accepted for years. And yet, even as more questions gathered and uncertainty deepened, prosecutors ultimately concluded that there was still not enough evidence to move beyond speculation. Then came 2022, and with it, a turn no one expected. Authorities announced that Robert Wagner had been officially cleared of any direct involvement. The case, they said, had reached its natural end. All leads in the Natalie Wood case have been exhausted, read the formal statement. For Lana, this was not justice. It felt like a deep wound reopening. If he truly loved my sister, why has he stayed silent before justice? She said. Even now, she refuses to step away from the search for clarity. She believes Wagner still holds pieces of the truth he has never shared. He was the last person with her, and that silence is the loudest thing of all. Her words continue to resonate through decades of uncertainty, keeping the lingering questions alive while much of Hollywood tries to move forward. After Natalie's passing, Robert Wagner's world changed overnight. The man once known for classic charm and the elegance of old Hollywood found himself at the center of a storm he could not escape. His polished image, built over many years, fractured the moment news spread from Catalina Island. That night did more than take away the woman he loved. It reshaped his identity. The public demanded explanations. The media pressed for conclusions. Tabloids placed his face on front pages beside harsh accusations and bold suggestions, creating narratives that traveled far beyond the facts. Every question directed at him carried an unspoken weight, a suggestion of blame that lingered in the background. The man who once felt completely at home in front of cameras began withdrawing from them instead. He canceled appearances, declined interviews, and quietly slipped away from Hollywood's social circles. Friends later said he seemed like a gentler, dimmer version of the person he used to be. Courteous in public, but inwardly weighed down by sorrow and constant speculation. For years, Wagner kept his distance, carrying the burden of rumor and grief and silence. Then in 2008, he finally broke that silence with his memoir, Pieces of My Heart. It did not read like a defense. It read like a man describing a lifetime of regret. Not a day goes by that I don't think of Natalie. I loved her with all my heart, and losing her was the darkest moment of my life. His words touched many, though interpretations varied. Some felt they were hearing the voice of a man trying to heal, while others believed he was shaping the story in a way that eased the weight on his shoulders. When the case was reopened once more, all the old questions resurfaced. Talk shows revisited the story. Tabloids re-examined every inconsistency, and even law enforcement officials remarked publicly that Wagner's accounts did not fully align. He continued to remain silent. The quiet he hoped would protect him instead allowed the speculation to grow. Then, in 2020, a new presence stepped into the conversation, someone from the next generation. His daughter, Natasha Gregerson Wagner, released the documentary Natalie Wood, What Remains Behind. For the first time, she entered the storm directly, determined to speak not as an investigator or critic, but as a daughter trying to understand a mother she lost too soon and a father she still loved. Her father had spent years stepping away from the conversation, and her intention was never to revisit old scandals. Instead, Natasha wanted to show the side of her parents that had been overshadowed by decades of speculation. Their affection, their struggles, and the quiet humanity that existed between them. Yet the shadow of that night in 1981 still lingers, a mystery that is never fully settled. "It's outrageous," Natasha said. "People created this story about my dad, but he loved my mom. He would have given his life for her." She had been only 11 when she lost her mother, and the memory remains vivid. Her final moment with Natalie was a hug before the trip. She remembered the softness of her Angora sweater, the gentle scent of her perfume, and the sadness she felt when she whispered, "Don't go." Even her compassion could not silence the ongoing debate. Lana Wood continued speaking publicly, repeating her belief that Wagner held unspoken truths. Her interviews reignited tensions and deepened a divide that has yet to heal. Families grew distant, supporters took sides, and Hollywood watched from a careful distance as two very different narratives unfolded. Through all of this, one truth remained impossible to ignore. Regardless of guilt or innocence, Robert Wagner has lived every day since that night, carrying the weight of Natalie Wood's absence. His life was shaped not by verdicts or public opinion, but by the quiet ache of losing the woman he loved. For Wagner, the most difficult part was not the investigation or the questions that followed. It was the silence that settled afterward. The long years of reflection, the memories that stayed close, and the knowledge that some mysteries may never be resolved. By 2025, he was 95, gentle in demeanor, often quiet, and living with a past that time could not fully soften.
His body had grown fragile, yet his mind continued to circle back to that night, as if an old film reel kept looping in the quiet of his thoughts. Every conversation, every sound, every small moment played over and over again, frozen in memory. When he finally agreed to sit for a recorded interview, his voice wavered beneath the weight of everything he had never been able to fully express. "People call me a monster, a liar, a coward," he said softly. "But the truth is simpler. I was a man in love who made mistakes, and I've carried them every single day since." Those words were not quite an admission, yet not a rejection either. They existed in a quiet space between regret and sorrow, where memory intertwines with emotion and certainty becomes harder to define. Wagner no longer sounded like a man trying to defend himself. He sounded like someone who had already reached his own internal verdict, shaped not by the world, but by his own reflections. When asked what truly happened that night in November 1981, he paused for a long moment before answering. "After I argued with Chris, I went to find Natalie, and she was gone," he whispered. "I thought she needed time alone. I should have checked. Maybe things would be different." His eyes filled with tears. "I was the last man with her. I can't deny that." That single phrase, "the last man with her," became something he carried like an invisible burden. He repeated it often in his later years, each time sounding smaller, older, and more fragile. Friends who visited him said he rarely spoke about Hollywood anymore. The glamour, the premieres, the cameras, all of it felt distant, like another lifetime altogether. In the end, the fame, the fortune, the long career on screen meant little. Every conversation circled back to her, Natalie, the woman he loved, and the night that never loosened its hold on him. He never lived near the ocean again. The sound of waves, once a source of calm, had become too heavy to bear. Instead, he chose a quiet life inland, surrounded by family photographs, fading memories, and rooms that always felt slightly too large for one person. His daughter Courtney described his days as gentle but weighted. Every time he saw a photo of Mom, he would fall completely silent. You could feel the sadness settle in the room. To the outside world, Robert Wagner still appeared polished, gracious,
and ready with the familiar smile people remembered from his classic roles. But behind closed doors, he lived with a tenderness shaped by loss and a past he could never fully set down. Even at 95, the sea remained a distant presence in his mind, not soothing, but filled with echoes of that night long ago. The wind, the water, the memory of her name seemed to travel with him, quietly, continually. In private notes, later shared by Natasha, Wagner wrote, "She was my compass, my direction. When she died, I lost all sense of where I was going." He lived a long life, yet one shadowed by what he could never clearly explain: the missing hours, the unanswered questions, the name he never stopped whispering: Natalie. More than 42 years later, the story of Natalie Wood remains suspended between memory and mystery. Robert Wagner's final reflections did not offer guilt or innocence, only the quiet weight of regret, the kind no interview or investigation could ever resolve. And so we are left, still wondering, still searching for meaning in a story time has never fully dimmed. Was it a tragic moment shaped by circumstance, a spark of emotion, or something that rests somewhere in between? Only two people truly knew what unfolded that night, and one of them never returned. What do you believe? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tap the like button if this story moved you, and subscribe for more journeys into Hollywood's forgotten corners. See you in the next story.